Hi, I'm Steve Pleich, and welcome to Voices from the Village. We're really delighted to be back here at Voices after a short hiatus, and also excited. There's kind of a new era of Voices from the Village. As you know, Voices has been one of the premier issues-oriented shows in Santa Cruz County for about 17 years. This year, we're collaborating with BTS Presents, and Brian Schulman and his great group of folks. As you know, Brian has been doing outstanding programming here for some time, and we're delighted to be partnering with Brian and his folks and appreciate his help in producing what we hope are going to be very exciting Voices programs throughout the year. And what is very appropriate for me is to have one of the great voices of Santa Cruz with me tonight, and that's Rabbi Phil Posner. Rabbi, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
You know, we've had...
Even though you kind of under-exaggerated greatness.
Well, and I'll mention that several times as we go forward. But we've had Rabbi on, his son Micah. We've had previous shows with his life partner Louise Drummond, who is working the cameras for us tonight. So it's really, activism is very much a family affair with the Posners, so we're delighted to have Phil on. The title of this show, of course, is Conscience in Action. Phil is the co-founder of the homeless advocacy group Conscience in Action, which is relatively new in town. So Phil, tell us, remind the viewers a little bit about yourself and your history in activism, which is long and very, very storied.
Well, where would I begin?
Well, begin as a freedom rider, just to give us a little bit of that.
I really should begin with my mother, because my mother was the social activist that moved me to consider the importance of being involved in society. Mm-hmm. And my own rabbi, Alav Shalom, Rabbi Albert Lewis of Los Angeles. So those two people especially motivated me to take seriously what we should be doing in our society to make it a better place. So I guess one of the earliest activism that I participated in was going on a freedom ride to Jackson, Mississippi, and getting arrested. Mm-hmm. Way long time ago, before you were born, I think. Yeah, well, probably. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And it's interesting, you and I go back quite a ways in terms of our association, both personally and with activism. You and I were with the Freedom Sleepers for every Tuesday for 2 years. We had a protest in front of City Hall, and in fact took our name, Freedom Sleepers, from Freedom Riders, which you were now over your strenuous objection. And we continued that, and of course now, recently, in relatively recent times, you and Nicholas Whitehead are co-founders of a group called Conscience and Action. Tell us about how that came to be and kind of what the mission is. We have a mission here. Let me read before you describe that. So the purpose of this organization is to monitor and examine issues in Santa Cruz that arouse our conscience regarding human suffering. Then, having decided as a group that a particular situation moves us to empathize with the suffering of others, we believe we are compassion called to take action or actions to alleviate such suffering. So wonderful mission statement. And you and Nicholas put that together, and tell us a little bit about how that came to be and kind of what the initial thought was in putting together the group. Well, it was kind of coincidental. I had been kind of searching for an organization that, to me, wanted to take action, particularly in terms of issues of homelessness in Santa Cruz. And then I ran into Nicholas, and we started talking about an organization that he was thinking about helping to found. So then we decided we would do Conscience and Action. And then recently I wrote that mission statement in congruence with the lawsuit that we filed on behalf against the city, on behalf of the residents of the Ross Ross camp. So. And I know the group's been very supportive. As people can recall, the Ross camp was the transitional homeless encampment behind Gateway Plaza, which existed for several months, and some of the folks who were residents of that camp actually filed a suit in federal court charging that there were violations of the Constitution, particularly cruel and unusual punishment.
in the fact that Santa Cruz has much less shelter space available than they have unsheltered people who really need that shelter space. So I know Conscious Action has been very supportive of that, and I think that's important.
Right. And, and that issue epitomized the concept of conscience and action, that when there was suffering, as was the case, and it still is obviously the case with so many homeless people in Santa Cruz and other cities and towns throughout our country, it necessitated action to try to help resolve the problem.
And I'll remind our viewers that Voices is a live call-in show, so you can reach us at 425-8848 extension 630. And you can call and ask Phil any questions you like. He's certainly willing and able to answer questions. I know that initially, because I'm also a member of Conscious Action and happy really to be a member and get to as many meetings as I can, initially the purpose of that organization was to try to get as many bathrooms open in Santa Cruz to really alleviate that suffering in Santa Cruz and to give people who are unsheltered kind of basic human dignity. So, and as a result of that, we have had a couple of different meetings with Tony Elliott, who is the now fairly recent appointed Parks and Rec director. So, how has that been going in terms, in your view, in getting bathrooms open and having some reaction to that that's positive?
Well, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, it was the issue of bathrooms, which was the first issue that Conscience and Action decided we wanted to embark on. And we've met with Tony a couple of times. As many people know, there are insufficient bathrooms available for homeless people. As I say, imagine a woman who has her period and she can't find a bathroom, or a man who's got serious prostate problems and has to take a leak, and there's not enough bathrooms.
No.
And in addition, for some weird, I think we kind of know the reasons, a couple of the bathrooms were closed that had been open to the public, particularly the one at Loudon Center and even the one at City Hall. So if you're homeless and you want to try to use one of those bathrooms, you can't do it easily at all.
And I know that part of the action that's being taken by the group, a lot of it is direct action, going to meet with the Director of Parks and Recreation, going to City Council meetings. You've spoken out many times at City Council. Your son, who we've had here with you, we had a program that we did on Voices, must be going back 2 or 3 years, as I mentioned, with you and Micah, called The Activist Posners, which was a wonderful show. Love to have you on. But Micah's still very much involved in issues around town, and in response to the fact that there are just not enough bathrooms in town for people on a 24-hour basis, particularly unsheltered people, he drafted an ordinance and sent that to City Council that you're hoping will be agendized and reviewed by City Council in August or so, when they come back from their hiatus.
Right, and the worry is whether we'll have the 4 votes on the City Council to pass that. And if we don't, then I think Conscience and Action, together with Huff and Food Not Bombs, may take some drastic action, like putting toilets all over the city to symbolize the problem.
Well,
we don't want to do that. First of all, it'll be a lot of work, but we have to do it because we're committed that it's unethical for there not to be sufficient bathrooms.
Now, just recently, you kind of launched a program again. This action is to alleviate suffering, to accord unsheltered folks some basic human dignity, to go around on your bicycle and provide some food. Now, how's that going?
Well, that's been a really interesting experience. Louise, who's behind that camera over there, and I, for the last, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, have gotten on our bikes. We get some bagels from the bakery. They give them to us, so it's good publicity for them. And we ride our bikes to areas where there are a fair number of homeless people, and we basically say to them, Are you hungry? Would you like a bagel with cream cheese or peanut butter? And of course, we get great smiles and a sense of delight. Yeah, that would be great. So then we pull out our bagels and our knives and we schmear what they want, as you well know yourself, because you and I on Monday evenings at the Red Church do the same thing with people there.
Yes, with Monday Coffee House, you and I are a team. You enjoy that very much.
Bagels. But this is really an outreach, because we decided that there are just so many people out there, particularly hungry around lunchtime, because sometimes they can get breakfast and dinners, but lunchtime is a hard time. So going around with bagels is a way of saying to people, you're important, and there are people who care about you and want to try to make your lives as less suffering as possible. There's actually a commandment in Leviticus 19 in the Bible, in the Torah, that says you should leave the gleanings of your field for the stranger and the homeless person, meaning that if you have a field, you should leave some of the produce for people, for people who are suffering. My position is that leaving is a good idea, but taking it to the people is even better.
And I'll mention, this is appropriate time really, that not only is Conscience in Action a political group, a grassroots group, an action group, but you're also affiliated with Hadashimenu, which is part of your Jewish religion. Tell us about Hadashimenu and their work as social action activists.
Well, both Hadashimenu and Temple Bethel, which we're also involved in, and Aptos, have social action committees, and those social action committees look at issues like in the environment, homelessness, and try to come up with things that we need to do. So one of the lovely people from Hadashimenu, the local synagogue downtown with Rabbi Eli Cohen, she's been really wonderful in providing us the cream cheese that we use to go out with our bikes. By the way, we call it bagels and bikes.
Bagels and bikes. Okay.
But we also are taking socks with us, because people unsheltered really appreciate getting socks. So it's bagel, bikes, and socks.
And as we know, socks are really gold, for unsheltered and homeless folks. Many of the physical ailments that they suffer come from their feet being cold and wet. And it just moves up their bodies, and they're subject to colds and things that we all are, but more so when your feet and perhaps even your shoes are just cold and wet all the time.
Right. That was really exemplified by the Ross camp and even the River Street camp, where a lot of people are right now. During that rainy season a couple of weeks ago, the place was flooded, and people, the bottom of the tents were all wet and soaked, and so not just socks but shoes were getting wet. So can our audience imagine what it's like to not have a place that you can call your own and have to endure, that kind of soggy, wet environment where your feet are all wet because you're exposed and you have no place to go? It's a tragedy.
Yeah, and I know that you and I both spent some considerable time at Ross Camp, and then when some of those campers at least moved over to the 1220 River Street Camp, which is actually a part of the winter shelter program that will end, by the way, in June 30 with now then 170 shelter spaces are going to evaporate, and that's something that's going to be on our minds now and in the future. But we've certainly gone out there as Conscious in Action. In fact, a couple of 3 weeks ago had a press conference out there and had Captain Harold Laubach Jr. out there, who is the administrator for the Salvation Army, answering questions about the camp.
The director. No, you're right.
Yeah. So you were asking him about whether or not people could be visited, what we could do to be able to maybe bring them some food, what things that they might need to kind of supplement the very basic things that are provided for them out there.
Right, and he was really very forthcoming, and that camp seems to be a better place than it originally was. And we are able to go visit in and out with food, and people can go there. So that's been, and I think that the other day, the barbed wire that was in front of it was taken out, supposedly.
Yeah, most of it along the front, with the exception of the part that's bordering kind of a little municipal pumping station corporate yard right next door, has been taken down, so it is much better appearance. I was out there myself last Thursday making a delivery of some bottled water, just some basic things. You know, Eric, who's the manager out there, has been very forthcoming, as you say, Captain Harold is, particularly with Conscious in Action, letting us know how Conscious in Action can help. In terms of not just kind of a subsistence level existence out there, but helping them thrive, helping them, you know, have an atmosphere that's conducive to really feeling like it's a place that you can, you know, relax and revive yourself and maybe get back into housing or employment or benefits.
You know, the nice thing though about activism for unsheltered people in Santa Cruz is not, believe me, it's just not Conscience in Action. As a matter of fact,
of course not.
You know, Food Not Bombs, with that incredible guy,
Keith McHenry,
Keith McHenry,
co-founder,
and Robert Norris, Puff. You know, we're in coalition. We work together to try to alleviate these problems, and it's challenging sometimes because we do have different approaches. As a matter of fact, you and I think we're getting published tomorrow in an op-ed piece, talk a little bit about our differences with some of our colleagues who tend to be a little bit more aggressive at city council meetings than you and I are. But it's all part of the process.
Of course.
And working together in a way with our differences gives us an even greater sense of power to hopefully make change. So in that way, it's healthy, those differences. But I am particularly grateful to Keith and to Robert, the fact that we can work together with Nicholas to do a little bit of stuff. And you are terrific.
Well, we all do the best we can, but it's interesting that there really are so many voices speaking to what is a community challenge of enormous magnitude, really. We have on any given night 1,000 or more unsheltered people just in the city of Santa Cruz, and yet there are maybe 200 or so shelter spaces available for those folks. We shelter about 23% of our unsheltered homeless people countywide, as contrasted to San Francisco that has 7,500 homeless folks, and yet they shelter fully half of them.
Wow.
So they've made a commitment to that, and one of the things that Conscious in Action and Huff and Food Not Bombs has tried to do, at least at City Council, is to raise the awareness of that. You know, raise the importance of that in the community to show council members that this is something that benefits the community if they commit to doing some shelter space or more services or whatever they're able to do with, certainly, as we understand, a very limited budget, but you have to kind of commit yourself to do it before anything happens.
And you mentioned City Council, and you know, I personally admire the people, including my son Micah, who did it, who go into politics and serve us in terms of government. But maybe you can explain it to me. I have a hard time understanding how at least 3 of those city council people that are on the council presently seem to lack empathy for the suffering of people who are unsheltered. I don't understand how people can vote against things that would help homeless people, and even at a minimal level, like making sure that they have places to sleep or to eat. I don't understand it. Do you understand it?
Well, I don't, but I do know that you've expressed that sentiment at City Council many times during our communications and during the discussions about particular agenda items that are germane to homeless and homeless issues and homeless policy.
Right.
And I think the more often that people are reminded that there is a certain amount of compassion that's needed, there's hard work, there's action, there is conscience, but there's also some compassion that's needed to really commit to doing that. And
And some of the people who know me as selling my book downtown with my dog know that at a couple of city council meetings I've appeared at the council with my dog and pointed out that my dog has the opportunity to go run around in a park and nobody. In fact, there's 2 parks in the city. I think we have 19 parks or 17, and 2 parks are reserved for dogs. And yet somehow we can't allow homeless people to sleep in a park. But our dogs, they can run around. I just find it unconscionable.
And I'm sure most people have seen you out on Pacific Avenue and out on the wharf selling your book. Really wonderful book. Tell us just a little bit about that. I'm sorry I didn't alert you earlier so you could have brought a copy of it, but tell us a little bit about your book, because I'm just astounded really at the number of books. And again, we have on the screen, if you have a question for Phil in the limited time we have available, 425-8848 extension 630, and you can call and ask Phil a question. We do have telephone and the capability here. But tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, as a matter of fact, it's relevant because one of the chapters in my book is a chapter on empathy. So the book is titled The Rabbi and His Famous Friends, Food for Thought, Character and Soul, Recipes and Blessings Included. And it has chapters that have beautiful people who personify ethical virtues. So, for example, the chapter on empathy has Mother Teresa and the late Elie Wiesel and me leading a discussion talking about what is the nature of empathy and how does empathy influence ethical behavior.
Right.
So my book is a book on ethics, and I'm really honored to to be out there with my dog selling my book and meeting people. And also it's fun because I get to be kind of a on the street rabbi, because occasionally people will say, Rabbi, I loved hearing about your book, but I'm feeling really bad right now because I just learned I just discovered that I'm come down with leukemia.
Yeah.
Would you say a prayer with me?
Yeah.
So sometimes I get to
Well, that's
be
why
a street rabbi.
that's why we call you a good rabbi. And I'll tell a little story. As you know, I'm a coordinator for the Faith Community Shelter, which is a rotating shelter. It is faith communities each and every night. And Hada Shemenu is kind enough to bring one meal for us at Peace United Church. And you brought last time something was the Mother Teresa themed.
Yeah, right. Right. As a matter of fact, right. That recipe, I think I kind of mentioned in my book, has recipes in memory and honor of these famous role models. And Mother Teresa, she had just died when I started writing the book. And when I called her order in Brooklyn, the Mother Superior said to me, "Oh, Rabbi Posner, Mother loved grapes." So I came up with a recipe of chicken salad with grapes. So that's what I brought.
And it was very popular. People loved it. But,
Right.
So what's now in the future with Conscious in Action, Hada Shemenu, a lot of, as we say, conscience, but also a lot of action going on?
Well, I think right now the issue again is going to be this issue of bathrooms, whether we get Parks and Rec to open up the Loudon Center bathroom and some of the others, and maybe put out porta potties. That's going to be the big issue, and we're going to have to struggle with how activistic should we get to put pressure on Parks and Rec and the city to do more.
And they do need to be reminded, as you say. Conscious in Action has had a couple of different meetings with Tony Elliott, who is now, as I say, the Director of Parks and Rec for the city, and trying to raise his consciousness about how important an issue this is and what he can do in terms of action to really make that happen. If you recall, Conscious in Action had a meeting with Martine Brunel, the city manager, and said, hey, the San Lorenzo Park bathrooms are closed. How come? And he said, well, I didn't know that. And 2 or 3 days later, they're open. So that's what it takes, is that kind of direct pressure sometimes, but at least jogging their memories over and over and over again to say, hey, we need to have some action on this.
Right.
So we'll see what happens with that. But and Hadi Shemenu, of course, Rabbi Eli Cohen, a wonderful person, and we've had him on. We had a whole show, in fact, with CUI, and it was remarkable at the end of it, because the Voices is a live program, and we had maybe a minute or two to fill, and Rabbi Eli actually sang. And so we sang, this thing is this wonderful mitzvah to sing at the end of the show, which is something I'd never experienced on Voices. It made it a whole different quality for me.
Right,
so.
yeah. No, he's a terrific. We're really lucky. We have wonderful rabbis in the 2 synagogues in Santa Cruz. And both of them are, Rabbi Paul is definitely a social activist, so we're really lucky that way.
And you were saying, speaking of, briefly, we just have another minute or two, but the program manager for our Faith Community Shelter actually came over to Temple Bethel and was talking to them about maybe expanding the Faith Community Shelter into Temple Bethel, which will be a wonderful opportunity for us. And so Rabbi Paula Marcus, always well to mention her and her activism, which is longstanding in Santa Cruz.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because our listening audience is some people out there are members of churches. We'd really welcome more congregational involvement in that wonderful program, because it really is an opportunity for homeless people to have a decent place to sleep at night. So.
Well, Phil, thank you for helping us kick off this wonderful new collaboration with BTS Presents and Voice from the Village. We're really looking forward to some terrific shows during this year. So thank you for being a voice, as you are in Santa Cruz. And we'll be seeing you soon, I hope. And I'll be seeing you next month for another edition of Voice from the Village. I've been Steve Pleich. Tune in next time.